We are on Mishlei Chaf Gimel Yud Beis Day 2, 23:12. Havia la Mussar libecha ve'oznecha leimrei da'as. Bring or incline your heart or mind to discipline or rebuke, and your ear to sayings of knowledge. Okay, yeah, and again, the bring is how I would translate it. Incline came from Sadigon. Lev is heart, but it could also mean mind because that's how Tanakh uses it. Mussar is either a synonym for, Mussar is either like the study of whatever Mishlei is about, or it is a synonym for Tochacha. Okay, our questions were, practically speaking, what is this telling you to do? And what does it mean to bring your heart or ear to Mussar or to Imrei Das, as opposed to bringing those things to you, right? In other words, usually would think that you should bring the knowledge to you. Here it's saying bring yourself to the knowledge, right? So what's the difference? Okay. 2, what are the implications of Lev and Ozen? Why is each associated with its respective clause? Meaning why Lev to Mussar and Oznecha to Da'as? And why is ear singular, if that even matters? What is Mussar in this context? Is it discipline or rebuke? Either way, what's the definition? 4, what are words of knowledge in this context? Is it all knowledge or is it a specific type? Is there a synonym for Mussar even? 5, what is the relationship between the two halves? Are they synonymous? Are they complementary with an E, or are they something else? 6, what is the Havamina of the pasuk? Does this take into account the fact that we're already in Perek Gimel, and clearly the person who's reading this has already brought their heart to Mussar and their ears, well, I guess their eyes, to Imrei Das. And then who's the audience? And then how is this connected to the next 2 pasukim? The next 2 pasukim are about, I'll read this anyway, because in case we start it today. Next 2 pasukim are Al Timnam Mina Ar Mussar Kitakina B'Shevet Lotamus. Lo Yamus, well, Lotamus either, but do not withhold discipline or rebuke from youth. When you hit him with a staff, you will not die. And then Ata B'Shevet Takina V'Nafsha Mishol Tatzil, you will hit him with your staff and you will save his soul from the grave. So same overall subject, but seemingly different audiences, because this is telling you to bring your heart to Mussar. That one's telling you to give Mussar to your son. So, like, what's the relationship? Okay, so yes.
I have a possible approach, but
should I summarize what we said yesterday?
Oh, yes.
That's okay. So I think what we said yesterday is, and fill me in if I'm forgetting anything, because we really didn't have a lot of time to elaborate on this, is the Havamina is that you don't need to bring your heart to Mussar, and it's talking to someone who already values Mussar, right? But he thinks somehow that the Mussar is going to come to him, right? And so we said, why do you need to bring your heart to Mussar? Because there's a resistance to it, okay? That unlike other areas of knowledge where if you're interested in it, then you can pursue it without any obstacles. Here, there's an active resistance to it, so you need to overcome that resistance and bring it to Mussar. And I think the relevance, if I can elaborate on this idea, the relevance is that you need to do it constantly, again and again and again. And I remember what Rabbi Moskowitz always used to say, that people fall in and out of, or not in and out. They usually fall into Mishlei and then they fall out of it, right? You can have someone who will learn Mishlei for a couple of years, and then they'll just stop, and it's very few people who will continue, and Rabbi Moskowitz always used to, emphasize, if you ask any Jew, do you value decision-making with Chachma? Yes. Do you value midos? Yes, but if you actually look and see how many people actually incorporate it into their life routine, it's not that many. And I don't mean specifically Mishlei, the same goes for Pirkei Avos, the same goes for learning, learning these ideas from other statements of Chazal, or from, Rabag on Chumash, it's one level to be interested in the ideas. This is not the wrong page. This is the wrong page. There's one thing to be interested in the ideas, but the other to make it a fixed part of your habit. And that's the thing is if you let it lapse, I mean, this is true of all habits. If you let it lapse, then it could just fall by the wayside. But here, there's active resistance to learning this. So if you're someone who says that you value Mussar, and again, Mussar being the study of decision making with Chachma, but you're not actually incorporating that into your life routine. So are you actually someone who values it, or are you someone who says you value it? And I think that's I think that goes along with this idea. So So props to you who come to Mishlei. yeah. For now, we'll check back in 5 years and see. Yeah. Isaac, you had another idea.
This is more speculative.
Okay. Not speculative as last night. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's check that.
Yeah.
Could this be like the Navon imperative?
The Nevon imperative. That would be a great movie title.
Yeah.
But what do you mean?
Meaning, the difference between the Chacham and Navon is Chacham is like a sedentary money changer who, if Chachma, if
I quoted this last night. Yeah.
If Mussar and Dimas come to him, then he'll learn it. Whereas a Navon, like if it comes to him, then he'll listen to the Mussar or the
Okay, could I just do something just because not everyone knows what you're talking about? I just want to quote it from the actual source, even though you said it over like correctly. But we, just for the sake of what do you call thoroughness, Devarim 1:13 in the qualifications of the judges, Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Havulechem anashim chachamim unvonim." Get for yourselves men who are wise and understanding, and viduim l'shivtechem. So Rashi quotes Isaac saying, "Nevonim are mivinim davar mitoch davar." Well, actually, I started from Mishlei last night. Hold on just a second. I think it's okay, and this is my thingy. I think it's important whenever you can quote something inside without like detracting too much from the thing, seeing it inside cements it in your mind as something real, and like also it's good in case someone asks you like, what's your raya? Like Ayala Fader asked me last night and I quoted this. So Chacham, we usually translate Chacham in terms of Roas and Olad in terms of how he makes decisions, but Chacham in learning is Zebal Shmua. This is someone who has heard or received knowledge. Navon is Musaf ala Chacham. He is adds to the Chacham, or is in addition to the Chacham. He knows how to derive knowledge from other knowledge. Umosif al Shmuah, so he adds to what he heard. Okay, and Rashi in Devarim is the cleanest statement of this. Well, it's really quoting Chazal. Nevonim mivinim davar mitoch davar. They understand one thing from another. Zohi sheshal Arios as Rabbi Yossi. This is what Arios asked Rabbi Yossi. Ma bin chacham lenevonim. What's the difference between chacham and nevonim? Chacham doma l'shulchani ashir. Chacham is similar to I like how you put it, a sedentary money changer. Sits down. When they bring him coins to look at, he looks at them and gets money, makes money. When they don't bring him coins, he sits and does nothing. Okay. Navon doma l'shulchani tagar. A navon is comparable to a merchant money changer. Kishmevin liros, when they bring it to him, roa, then he gets business. Kishmevin, and when he doesn't, then he goes out and brings in business on his own. Yeah.
How would a navon different from somebody who is simply creative, so to speak, like a creativity?
That's a good question. I'm going to get back to that in a second. I want to hear out the rest of Isaac's idea, and then I think this might bring us into clarifying what a navon is, if Isaac's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is, I say Mishlei up until now is giving you chachma, which brings you to the level of chacham.
Okay.
But he's saying, don't just settle for what I have written here.
Yeah.
You go out and bring Mussar to your heart and sayings of knowledge to your ears.
Okay. So good. So I like this approach. Right, so let me now answer Ellie's question, and then I want to use this and try to refine the pasuk. So you said, what's the difference between a navon and someone who's just a creative thinker? Yeah. So it's interesting. Rabbi Moskowitz would always translate navon as creative thinker, but I think there's different types of creativity. Okay, to quote Rav Pesach, or to paraphrase Rav Pesach, there's the creativity needed to paint a magnificent painting, or come up with an imaginative like literature or whatever. It's a constructive creativity, and then I'm not gonna say destructive. Then there's a creativity of being able, a creativity based on clear thinking, where you're really getting at the heart and the essence of something and distilling something to its principles, which is where you can see past all the particulars and get at the essence of something, and then from that essence derive new knowledge and understanding, So creativity that is led by the imagination is not necessarily going to get you knowledge. It's still a useful thing. Having imagination is a good skill, but the creativity that we're talking about here is the ability to like look beneath the particulars and see the underlying principles, and then like arrive at new knowledge through there. Like the Chacham is limited to the particulars. Like you tell him, I'm just trying to think of a recent idea where we can illustrate the difference between how a Chacham would take it. And okay, yeah, let's say the recent pasuk that we did about when you sit down to dine with with either let's say like a ruler, right? And like you're tempted by all these like rich things, So and he says, place a knife at your neck and like don't believe like the false bread. So the Chacham will look at that and say, okay, I got to be on the lookout when I'm at a rich guy's home and he's offering me good food, a ruler's home and he's offering me good food. Then he really has his own agendas and like he'll take precautions ahead of time. But what he might not do is say, well, what's the underlying principle? The underlying principle is being seduced by the scenario and taking things at face value. And I really should apply this to other scenarios also, not just a ruler, but maybe to like when I'm on a date, when I am like interviewing at a business, like, and he'll be able to see the underlying principle and not just get attached to those particulars. And that's creativity in the sense that like he can extrapolate new principles. I don't know what type of creativity you were asking about. I'm saying like there's broadly speaking, there's creativity of the like led by the imagination, which may or may not be correlated to knowledge, and then there's creativity that comes from being able to see to the heart of something like in knowledge and extrapolating.
Right. I guess the creativity I was working with is more in line with like the imagination, right? So like I understood it as being able to produce something that has both novelty and usefulness.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that is important, but I don't think that's the type of creativity that a novel is.
More connecting ideas together.
Right. Yeah. And that's the area where it can come in handy, which is being able to see new patterns or combine things in new ways. That is a quality that a novel has. But again, like you can be a J.R.R. Tolkien and like create worlds, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're understanding things like in terms of Mishlei, in terms of understanding principles of decision making. Yeah, Chizkiah?
Would either one of these definitions still incorporate problem solving? Yeah.
So I think the creative person that Ellie's talking about also does problem solving, but I think it's a different kind of problem. Like again, just being the brother of someone who's a writer, like the types of problems that Johnny's solving feel different than the types of problems that there's a conflict at work, and like I have to like figure out how to like Mishleically play to all the right parties and work through that or whatever. Yeah.
And what kind of problems are we defining here? That way.
Here it would be problems with in your mitos or in your decision making. Yeah, broadly speaking. I know this is like really broad. Yeah, David.
Okay, I was going to ask the question: does the person know that he needs this Mussar or he needs the Imadat?
Yeah.
Not sure if I could really ask that question.
So I think according to your approach, Isaac, then we are talking to someone who already values Mussar and Imre Das, and as a passive recipient. So he already values it, but he doesn't really realize that he could go out and generate his own, And again, this is like, just to quote another thing in Mishlei, this is what Shlomo means when he says, Chachmas bachutz tarona barchovos titian kolah. Chachma is singing out in the streets and giving forth its voice in the public squares. Barosh homios tikra. It's calling out where people gather with pischei sha'arim at the openings of gates, ba'ir in the cities. Amreha tomer. It speaks. So like there's always Mishlei ideas being proclaimed out there. Which is why again, like whenever you're like watching a movie, right? I mean, again, that was the Mishlei movies, the class I created of like, when you watch movies, get Mishlei ideas out of it. Ryan Moskowitz giving the Mishlei shiur on short stories for 2 summers. I think we just read short stories and just got Mishlei ideas from the short stories, like there's just Mishlei everywhere,
So then you read that I got from that question, then saying to someone to not only go to Mussar or Imre Dat.
Yeah.
Not only when like, oh, there's a problem that has arisen. I need to go and like figure out how to solve this now.
Yeah.
But there are always problems, whether or not you recognize that there is something like evident here. There are always things that you have that can be worked on through going to Imre Dot.
Right. Yeah. Don't and that's another thing. That's another Machayev is that seeing a thing that you need to work on and then seeking out the solutions for that, as opposed to just being an imperfected being and then getting an idea and saying, oh, I can apply that here and I can apply that here. Like it's a different level.
We're in a constant state of needing to perfect ourselves and work on ourselves. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This reminds me of a question we also had last night. So last night's pasuk was about the difference between how a tzaddik and a chacham relate to teaching or learning. And one of the questions that was raised is what, and we don't even need to go into the ideas. The question was, what holds back the chacham from doing what the tzaddik does? And I was in a quandary about, is there an emotional block or is it just a developmental level in intelligence? I say the same question here. What holds the chacham back from seeking out this creativity? Definitely there is a level where there's a point where you're not on the level to do Tefilah in Mishlei. Like you just don't know how to you need a certain amount of exposure to Chachma in order to be able to develop this intuition to be able to see stuff on your own. Question is, beyond that, is there an emotional block that you could be aware of,
Wait, beyond this point?
Beyond just lacking the intellectual ability to do Tefilah and Mishlei. Like again, applying this to Isaac's idea, this pasuk is addressed to a chacham who is used to getting Mishlei, but not used to seeking new Mishlei ideas. So I'm saying developmentally, there's a point where you just can't. If you try to get Mishlei out of movies, then you're just going to end up getting bad ideas. But there's a point where you are developmentally ready. But the question is there an emotional block that Shlomo was trying to make you aware of to remove? Yeah, Fazio.
How do you translate Tefilah?
Tefilah is understanding, and the way we're defining that is seeing the underlying principles and being able to derive new particulars. Yeah.
Oh, it's with a V, Tefilah.
Yeah. Same word as Bina.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think it's not necessarily obvious to a person that they can just look at a scenario and derive Mishlei principles from that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I relate to the Havamina of Shlomo has distilled patterns of human behavior down in a way that we could digest, but just looking at a scenario and trying to figure out what the behavioral principles are at play is gonna it's just gonna be too complex. It's not gonna be,
So are you saying it's intellectual?
I'm saying at least part of it is intellectual.
Okay, part of it.
I'm not saying this is necessarily
Right. Yeah.
But,
yeah, Ellie?
So just I guess somewhat of an idea that I guess to my understanding there are at least two ways to attain das, which would be through this pasuk suggesting Mussar, if you're connecting the two,
Mm-hmm.
and chachma, having chachma should lead to having das.
Mm-hmm.
Chachma seems more any internal
Mm-hmm.
thing, something you have internally that leads to das. Well, Mussar seems like it's coming from external sources, like other people.
Okay, so that's you're taking, if you take Mussar as rebuke, then it's coming from other people. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a good distinction. Are you saying that, just to make sure I'm hearing this correctly, are you saying this to augment Isaac's idea, or are you saying this as your own new approach?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, because with Isaac's idea, then I think it is more of the Mussar as discipline. But yeah.
Very well may have stemmed from Isaac's idea, but I don't understand how discipline is also, would that not be external?
Well, so discipline is like Mishlei's mission statement. We're quoting Perek Aleph a lot today. Mishlei's mission statement is Lada'as Chachma u'Mussar lahavin Ribina, to know Chachma and Mussar. And the way that they define it in different ways, but just as examples, like Rabbeinu Yonah says that Chachma in this context refers, Chachma in this context refers to the close. Okay, Chachma in this context refers to the Chachma hi midas hatzadikim b'darchei ha'emes v'hatzedek asher yodia v'yivar b'sefer zeh. Chachma refers to the traits of the tzadikim and the ways of truth and righteousness that are taught in this book. Mussar hu gnus harishayim. Mussar refers to the study of the degradation of the Rishaim, b'hodas hanezek v'hahefsed ha'megia mehem, and teaching about the consequences that come from them. So Mussar is the study of consequences, basically, of bad decisions, and Chachma is the study of good decisions and the benefits that come from them. So it's not like hearing Mussar from someone else. It's like a certain area of like study, a certain subject. So like just like biology is not something you get from other people. Biology is a subject matter. Math is a subject matter. Mussar is a subject matter. That's what I mean by it's not something you get from other people. Yeah, it's its own area of Chachma. Yeah.
I think there's maybe an emotional resistance to like also, which is I think in a certain way it's like really painful and exhausting to be, going about your life being like fully conscious, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's why we like sleeping.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively. Yeah.
And so I see it, it's like the person having some sort of semi-emotional havamina that they can when they are like when they happen upon Mussar, then they'll learn from it because they know that improves their life or whatever, but they're not taking the step of saying, so like now I need to like go out and get Mussar for like whatever, for everything.
Right. That's related to the resistance point, I think, also from yesterday, right? It's just that you're talking about being in a state where you're always looking for stuff. Like, how can I get pain next from like seeing where I need to like change my decision making? Yeah, Sean?
Yeah, so I have a new approach that I think builds on
good
principle, which I was talking about.
I was waiting for a new approach from you. Yeah.
Okay, so we asked, why is it that you're bringing Mussar to your heart,
bringing your heart to Mussar,
not Mussar to your heart, right? So in line with that, so I think that there's this assumption that we have that like we can self-regulate ourselves, right? And that we can, if we do something wrong, we can recognize that we did something wrong and then punish ourselves. And part of it is, even if you recognize that you did something wrong, there is still like this self-defense mechanism where you want to be like, oh, I understand that this was the wrong thing to do, so I don't need to punish myself. And so because you intellectually understand it, you don't think that you necessarily need the rebuke and the external things. And so if you're not in a place which is going to naturally give it to you, so then you aren't going to always be the best at naturally giving it to yourself. And so even though you conceptually understand it, you're missing out. And so therefore you need to go into a place which is going to automatically rebuke you. That way you don't need to constantly be engaging in the system of self-disciplining yourself and self-rebuking yourself, because that can be an exhausting thing and you will often want to like cheat yourself out of it.
Okay. I like the approach, but I'm also hearing like, maybe this is my confusion, a couple of different ideas. So I just want to sort it out and make sure I understand what you're saying. So step one, do you say it again? And I'm going to stop you this time at,
Okay. So because naturally people, even a chacham is going to make mistakes. Right. And so when he makes a mistake, he's going to recognize, oh, I made a mistake. Right. And so intellectually, you can recognize that you made a mistake. Right. And then what should follow is that you should in some way punish yourself or rebuke yourself or have some external thing on yourself in order to internalize this concept so that you don't repeat the thing again. Now, if you just leave the system of rebuke to your own devices, meaning that you're going to be the one to rebuke yourself, so that allows there to be a chance that you're not going to, in the end, rebuke yourself.
Okay, pause there for 1 second. Okay, so one version of the idea that I'm hearing from you is that in terms of what the havamina is. So I think, so tell me if this is accurate or if this is my own take on it, that the havamina is I could do it through da'as alone. Meaning that I don't need the step, like this guy who Mishlei is talking to clearly values knowledge, right? Because he doesn't want to make mistakes, but he thinks he can just bring his ear to words of knowledge without the mechanism of bringing his heart to Mussar. and that the DOS is just going to, once I know what the mistake is, that is sufficient to prevent me from making this mistake going forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So then Kamash Malan, you need to bring
go into a place which is going to automatically rebuke you, where you're not in charge of your own rebuke and self-discipline.
Okay. So second question is, so you are taking the rebuke here as Mussar as rebuke.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So meaning you need to set up systems where you're going to be getting it externally that hold you accountable. Okay, yeah. Okay, good.
If you don't have those systems, holding yourself accountable requires you to engage your mind to a much larger degree. Yeah. And it's just a waste of brain power, right?
Okay,
get that externally.
Right.
And it's going to exhaust you and not allow you to devote your mind and your power towards other things.
Good. So just to piggyback on that for 1 second, which is that I'm a big fan of habit cultivation, and one of the strongest things you can do in any habit cultivation is an accountability buddy, and so like just the fact that someone else knows whether I am like holding to my goals, even if there's no actual consequence, that itself is like a big, it just makes it in the realm of objective reality instead of just subjective like intentions. So that's really useful. And then also having someone, I think there is a benefit in, I think, okay, it's funny. It parallels the 3 statements of, I learned a lot from my Rambam. I learned more from my friends, and I learned the most from my students. I don't know if this is in that same ranking, but I think it helps to have accountability coming from 3 sources. Okay, one is someone who is like in a position of like a Rebbe or a parent or a mentor, someone who is above you or more advanced than you in the area that you're trying to cultivate, who can see things from that perspective, and who also has a certain amount of psychological authority. You really do as a psychological authority. Second is a peer. Okay, it could be a friend, it could be a chavrusa, it could be a peer to hold you accountable, which doesn't have that same psychological threat of an above authority, because it's someone who's like equal to you, and also you can be open with them in a different way than you can be open with a Rebbe. But the disadvantage obviously is they're not experienced, not as knowledgeable in the area. And then the other type of accountability is when you're in charge of doing something for someone else who is dependent on you, either like in terms of knowledge, like a student, or in terms of like, training, like if you're mentoring someone, or like a parent, and I think having accountability, like being aware that those are 3 zones of accountability, that the more you can make use of that, then the more you'll be accountable. And there's different strategies within each one. Yeah, Ali?
Yeah, so building off what Sean said,
yeah.
When a person acknowledges a certain behavioral flaw, or the source of that flaw, say like, oh, when I was a child, such and such, my experiences or environment brought upon this mindset, something like that. What I've seen at least is a lot of times people will be like, well, you're like aware of it, and that's like the first step. Yeah. And that could be good sometimes, and it is the first step, but a lot of people I find, or at least myself, tend to stop there. Being like, okay, I'm aware of it. Right. I don't have to go much further. And
there's the feeling of like you could easily lapse into, well, and therefore it's not my fault because this is just how I was raised, or this, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Sean.
This reminds me of what we were saying about the Derek Minister from the previous pasuk.
Yeah.
Right, with the pool. Right, that the atomium were representative of support systems. Yeah. Right, that you're stealing from your support system. Yeah. So then that could tie into this what we're saying now, right? Which is that you want external rebuking systems as a support system.
Right. Okay, that's good. That's a good tie-in. Yeah. Okay, and then the practical advice would be to set up an accountability, an external accountability thing that you're going to entrust your heart to, because you can't, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. Yeah. Okay, good. That's a great idea. Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah. So essentially, we're going to have an accountability session at the end of every semester after yeshiva.
Always seeking to impose Mussar on other people, Ariel.
I want it for myself also.
Oh yeah. I know you want it for yourself, but this is a pattern. Yeah.
Open season on
yeah. Again, this is part of why the self-improvement chat is something that I started and hope people make use of. I mean, I try, but I can't. I can only do so much. Yeah.
I can say at least for myself.
Yeah.
even if I don't end up posting there, the fact that that periodically there's like you'll say something in the chat or something like that helps for me to.
Okay, I like to fantasize that that's going on with everybody instead of sometimes I feel like I'm just posting to crickets, but
I say covered himself because he gains from it without posting it. So
yeah, but it's also shortchanging himself. Yeah. You post from time to time. Yeah. Okay, so let's do one of the Mefarshim. Let's do Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay. He is the one who actually takes this up as its own idea. One of the ones. Okay. Rabbeinu Yonah says, "Havil Mussar libecha va'oznacha limrei das." Hine nasan Shlomo alav shalom halev lemusar va'ozen limrei das. So Shlomo assigns, associates the heart to Mussar and the ear to imrei das. Ubira in explanation, ki halev hu hachifetz v'hataiva. So here he's saying heart means desire, two words for desire. Kasher bir nuhu barov mukomos hasefer, like we explained in many other places, which by the way, Isaac, maybe you can corroborate this. I think Rabbeinu Yonah's other favorite explanation of heart is midos. I think he says that a lot in Pirkei Avos. That heart is perfection of midos. So I was kind of surprised to see him say this, but
I don't know.
Okay.
I actually haven't learned so many. The word lately.
Oh, that's a fair point. Okay, so heart is, he says, is desire and yearning, whatever. Mussar hu divrei hachachma hatzrichim l'tikun maaseh hashomea. Okay, I love this definition. Mussar is words of chachma that are necessary for the correction of the actions of the listener. Okay, so this actually fits in with both translations of Mussar, rebuke, or like the type of discipline that Shlomo HaMelech has here, right? But it's practical knowledge, yeah.
Is it that are necessary for or necessity?
That are necessary for.
Okay.
Yeah. The imrei das, and what is statements of knowledge in this context? Yedias divrei hachachma she'inan tzrichim l'tikun maaseh ha'ish hazeh. This is knowledge of chachma that is not necessary for the improvement of this person. So not practical knowledge. Okay, so let's just review here. So Mussar is practical knowledge that's necessary for the listener to correct his actions. Imrei das is not practical knowledge. So I'm going to assume at this point that would refer to, let's say, like areas of pure science, theoretical things like abstract halacha, right? Like, just knowledge itself. Okay. Al kain amar. Therefore it says havia lemusar libecha. Therefore it says bring your heart to Mussar. Ki kasher tishma hamusar tabi elav chafatzacha v'tavasacha l'kaimoso. When you hear Mussar, you need to bring your desire and your taiva to fulfill it. V'tasim libecha miyad lahavi alapola, and you need to apply your desire to carry it out in action. Shetishma hamusar, and whenever you are hearing Mussar, listening to Mussar, tizbonin ki ata chaser hamida hazos. This is a good one. Whenever you listen to Mussar, you should think about the fact that you lack that midah. Okay, I assume it means the midah that you're hearing about. Okay, yeah. V'taskim b'libacha la'asoso, and you should consent or agree in your heart to do it. Because you're tishma imrei das, and when you hear words of knowledge, which don't have any practical ramifications, rather it's just to become wise in them and to know words of chachma. You should bring your ear to them to know them. Okay, so I don't know what his idea is yet, but let me just paraphrase here, right? So he's saying there's you have to have two types of listening. Okay, there's listening to practical knowledge and listening to theoretical knowledge. Okay, when you listen to practical knowledge, you need to summon your willpower to ask yourself, where am I lacking in this in my life, and how can I generate the will or apply the will to implement this, and how can I practically implement this? All right, and when you hear non-practical knowledge, then you should focus on knowing it as clearly as possible. So the question is, what are the havaminas? Right. I think the havamina in the first half is much easier, which is that there are people who listen to Mussar all the time, but they don't take that step of saying, how can I apply this practically? And this is why we always ask the question, what's the practical application of this? There are many times when again, I think just commonly so many divrei Torah that you hear on the Parsha have practical implications, but people don't take the step of saying, okay, how am I going to actually, where am I lacking this idea in my life, and how am I actually going to practically apply this? And if you don't take that step, then the Mussar is not reaching its kiyum, which is befall, which is in action. but the question is, what's the Havamina on the second side? Yeah. If there is a Havamina on the second side, yeah.
One is answering the question.
Yeah.
I think it's not that there's a Havamina on the second side specifically. It's saying not to complete these two things.
Right.
Because a person might just lump them together as knowledge.
Yeah. That happened last night. Someone was trying to get a completely impractical idea from the pasuk that had no practical ramifications, and then when pressed to give a practical idea, it was ludicrous. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. All those greens. So it's it's saying like I think it's drawing the categorical distinction. There's there's Mussar and there's Imre Das.
Yeah.
And don't mistake one for the other.
Yeah.
I think the person isn't. I think the mistake typically goes one way. But
right.
They're not the same thing. So you don't say, oh, this Mishlei Podcast is in the same category as knowing a fact about dinosaurs.
Right.
It's not all the same.
Right. Yeah, and that is actually the first step. I think it's the first step. Hold on a second. In Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book, then I believe his first step is classify the book according to its kind and subject matter, practical versus theoretical. Theoretical books teach you that something is the case, whereas practical books teach you how to do something you want to do or think you should do. So that is, and when he says book, he doesn't just mean book, he means like anything you're reading that's nonfiction, then you should assess whether this is theoretical or practical. And if it's practical, you should assess what is the intended outcome. If it's theoretical, what knowledge is it trying to give me? And people just don't necessarily do that, Yeah. So you're saying the Havamina is not just in the second one, it's conflating the two and making sure that you take the first step of what's the opposite of conflating? Deconflating of classifying the two and then apply the method to it accordingly. Yeah. Yeah, Ezra.
I think there are also categories of people where some people.
That's what I was thinking.
Everything practically.
Yeah.
Some people see everything theoretically.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's saying that everybody has to.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was actually thinking about that in terms of Bekius students. Clearly, they related to Torah in a purely theoretical way, where they only were concerned with the knowledge and not applying it to perfection. And then there are people who are just not interested in theoretical knowledge, and they're only interested in things that they can apply in practice, and that's just going to like leave out a whole aspect of their development. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, sure.
On the latter,
yeah.
Since they obviously think in utilitarian terms,
yeah.
Is there a utilitarian reason to think about philosophical ideas that don't have an application?
Yes, I think that's the message here of that there are, we hold in Judaism that knowledge of reality has value per se, and even if it has no practical implication whatsoever, whether it's in science or whether it's in halacha, but the mistake, the thing is you have to make sure that you're getting that correctly. Like I'll give you an example of this. So what immediately comes to mind when you think of a halacha that doesn't have a practical implication? Okay. All right. Clearly you're not learning the Rambam enough. No. Right now we can't do korbanos. No, that Chazal say has never happened, never will happen. Ben Sora Mora, right? So what do Chazal say? Why is it there?
What is it?
The wayward and rebellious son, right? Say again. Okay, so do you know the lashon that they use? Dorosh v'kabel skar, right? Expound on it and receive reward, right? Okay, that also in Irhani Dafas is the other one that they say. So,
like burning the city or whatever.
Yeah, the city where everyone is led to worship Avodah Zarah, and like you have to like destroy the city, etc. So I've heard like two different people in terms of the way that like they would approach that Darash of a couple scar. One is like you go into it and get all the brisker svaras, like it's a halakha area, you get all the brisker svaras. Then you have like Rav Hirsch who says and then I'm not just saying it's just Rav Hirsch. He's just the one that this is in the graveyard of shiurim that of aborted shiurim that I was going to give this year. That it was teaching you essential ideas about Judaism's view of development as what teenage development is and what parenting is and how to have educational instruction and moral instruction, and the schar that it's talking about and the drisha it's talking about is not theoretical knowledge. No, it's practical knowledge, so that's an example of a misdiagnosis of if you, or another absurd example. And I only heard this through hearsay from Rav Pesach, but he said that there was a group of, I don't know if it was Hasidim or people in the early Mussar movement who tried to learn Bava Kama as an allegory for character development. Shor Shenagach Esapara is a mashal for the Yetzer Hara, and they're taking something which, not faulting them for wanting character development, but that's not what Bava Kama was written for. Bava Kama was written to teach you halachos and nizik, and there are practical ideas, but not the whole thing is not a allegorical ethical treatise, So So that's that. Yeah.
Is this getting into what that value is of?
I don't think this is getting to what that value is. Yeah. I think he's just saying that you should know what it is. And it's interesting, by the way. Can we explain why he I understand why you need the libecha for the Mussar, because it really dovetails with both ideas we were saying, which is that there is a resistance to applying it, and you need to make sure that either systems in place or that you repeatedly bring yourself to it. Is there a reason why he emphasizes the Imre? By the Oznecha to the Imre Das? Yeah.
I think you said it was saying not to internalize it the same way you do Mussar, to try to find practical applications. This is Rabbeinu Yonah.
Rabbeinu, yeah.
But that it should just be surface level knowledge that you know about, but not something that you're trying to apply. Interesting.
Okay, so that definitely flows from Rabbeinu Yonah. I guess what I'm looking for is what. Okay, so the Hava Amina. Okay, I understand that in terms of the way we're learning it, the Hava Amina is that you're not going to make this distinction at all, right? But the practical mistake you're going to make for the first half is listening to practical ideas and not bringing your heart to the table, right? So what's the practical thing for? Is it not bringing your ear to the theoretical knowledge? What is that practical thing? Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say tying the idea of bringing your ear. Is very tied to lishmoah, right? Yeah. And lishmoah is not just to literally hear, but really to learn.
Yeah.
Bring yourself to people who are going to be saying things that you're going to want to learn from. So people that you respect and care about versus just any source of intelligence. It needs to be someone that you have this inclination to in terms of their words straight to you that is going to actually affect you.
Okay, so
that's cerebral.
Okay, so I think that's a good type of answer that I'm looking for here. I'm going to give a different answer based on. So this is the expression girsa diankusa, the stuff you learn when you were first starting off and learning, and you remember it very well. So I still my girsa diankusa ended after my first year of yeshiva, but I still remember there was a brief period where Rabbi Gober gave a Mishlei shiur, and I still remember all the ideas I think that he gave. And one of the ideas was on Perek Sheni. I have a cassette tape of this somewhere. But B'ni im tikach amarai u'mitzvos atin tzponitach l'hakshив l'chacham oznecha tate libcha l'tevuna. So listen attentively with your ear to chachma, incline your heart to tevuna. That's interesting. Okay, we're not going to go into this now. So Rabbeinu Yonah learns this whole thing as the stages of getting chachma. Okay, so he says the first step. This is the first step that you have in attaining chachma. That you listen carefully and discern with your ears the words of your teachers who instruct you about the truth, and you do it clearly. And you focus your hearing without any addition or subtraction. Okay, then he says, there are people that don't focus their hearing. And they add to what the Rebbe says, and they take away from what the Rebbe says. Okay. I just lost my place. Gam yidmu lefamim sheshama al lav hein v'al asur mutar v'yotvo. And they'll sometimes imagine that they heard yes when really it was no, or that they heard asur when it was really mutar. Okay. So in the Brisa in chapter 6 of Avos, when it goes through the 48, is it 48? 48 ways that Chachma, 48 ways that Chachma is acquired. It says Shmiyasa, Hamachavin Lishmuasa, someone who is careful with his listening. Okay, so I think the answer is like this, is if you're just getting Mussar, right, which is practical knowledge, then exactitude is not as necessary. In other words, if you get the gist of it and you don't get the exact, like all the details and stuff, it's not going to kill you, right? But if you're learning science or math or halacha or, and it's purely theoretical, so then getting it exactly correct is the whole point. Like if you don't get it exactly, you're missing the knowledge itself, So there's a certain type of attentiveness of getting everything clearly that is especially needed. It's needed in both, but it's especially needed in the realm of purely theoretical knowledge. And then having desire to like implement it is really only relevant for Mussar. So, and the only reason I'm favoring that explanation, I mean, I like what Sean said. I'm favoring this because it's the most literal interpretation I can think of for oz nechel imridas, which means listen very carefully to the knowledge, and make sure that you don't add or subtract, detract. Okay, yeah.
You need to listen very carefully when it comes to review.
Yeah, so you do, but the essence of it is not in all the particulars. The essence of it is in how it affects you. I think that's why like it's the emphasis is more on the desire. Yeah.
It's not bad as something that Rambam said.
Sure.
For acquiring Mussar.
Yeah.
He said.
You guys can go. I don't want to cut into shiur. Yeah.
Yeah. He said Tisponing kiata chasar hamidazos.
Yeah.
I think the way a lot of people will approach Mussar is they'll say like, oh, like what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
But I think a really good strategy that is saying is to think like, I am falling into this trap currently.
Right.
And then think
about
that's
a good way to
say
it. Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
So just to support what you're saying, I think there are studies showing that like even listening to someone, like active listening, is like very difficult to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Just in general.
That's actually another good point. Yeah. I almost call him Rabbeinu Adler. Mortimer Adler has another book called How to Speak, How to Listen, which is a companion book to How to Read a Book, when he talks about active listening, and it is extremely hard. So just to quickly summarize all the ideas. There was the approach from yesterday of the being aware of the resistance that you have for the endeavor of Mussar, of Mishlei Mussar, right? And taking efforts to overcome that resistance. Then there's the idea of the accountability of the rebuke type Mussar that you're going to need in order to sustain these the changes that you want to make. And there's Rabbeinu Yonah about not conflating the two types of practical knowledge and not practical knowledge. And then your idea was the idea that Sean piggybacked off of.
The novel thing?
The novel thing, yeah, right. Is that there's a don't hover. If you're a chacham who's capable of becoming a navan, don't content yourself with that step. And we got to figure out what the resistances are. Yeah. Okay. Good haul. I did not know that this would be a pasuk with its own ideas. I really was afraid this was just going to be an introduction to the next pasuk, and there wouldn't be anything here. Okay, very good. Yeah.